Welcome to Retro Retros. So I'm just going to give you a quick look at the Prelude that we've been working on lately. All the work's complete really, so she's ready for her MOT. You can see how sort of generally clean and tidy she is. So I'm just going to climb in and explain about one little issue that we still have to resolve. Now, it came to light, if you pardon the pun, during a pre-MOT check that the lights aren't really wired up properly. I've noticed that when you put the dipped beam on, the main beam comes on. When you switch the main beam, the dipped beam comes on. The telltale lamp that lives just inside the instrument cluster there is not working in either situation, whether the dipped or the mains are on. So that needs sorting out. The beam is all over the place too, so it's I think there's probably Euro spec lights on here, and we're in the UK, so of course we drive on the left and we need our lights to point out of the way so as we don't dazzle oncoming drivers. Now the only way around it really is to do what we should have done a little while ago, which was go ahead and find some old genuine headlamp units to put into this pop-up headlight Prelude. So fortunately I've managed to find some online, and in the interest of expediency and safety really, because they are quite precious and fragile, I'm actually going to catch the train to Salisbury in an hour or two to go and meet the chap and bring them back. It will be dark by the time we get back, so I think what we'll do is wait until tomorrow, and then I'll actually explain a bit more about the situation, and I'll show you around the car a little bit more and explain how to actually remove the headlamps safely, how to protect yourself and from the motors and all the rest of it, and we'll get those replaced and hopefully get the thing ready for all done, ready for the MOT. So stay tuned. So it's a new day, albeit a cold one, here on Retro Retros. You can see now that it's just starting to thaw out enough to actually work on the car this morning. A bit chilly here in England today. So we're going to be working on the headlights today. We've got the MOT next week, and we think everything's okay with the car except for the headlights. Now, there's a little there was a little surprise when I first bought the car, in that these lights here are clearly the aftermarket ones, and I've not really been using the car in the evening, so hadn't noticed that the lights were inoperative in that respect. So anyway, when you turn the dipped beam on, the main comes on. When you turn the main on, the dipped comes on. There's no telltale light inside or anything like that. So I've had a look at it, and I thought originally that perhaps just the lights weren't turned, wired up to the right connections on the bulbs and that sort of thing. And I had a look, and basically there's kind of, it's supposedly plug and play, and there's connectors and various things going to relays and all that kind of stuff in there. But quite frankly, it's a mess. It's not been done terribly well. The lights weren't closing properly, and because the wiring looms were in the way, that was trapping wires against the chassis, and it was just horrible. So it had always been my plan to get rid of these lights anyway, for somebody that perhaps likes this sort of thing, but I'm certainly going to put the OEM ones back in. So last night we went to pick up some new lights, and we have them just here actually. So we've managed to find these, jumped on a train and met the chap personally, so we've got them nice and quick, which is fantastic. And the plan today really was just to replace these. So the first thing worth saying is that before we work on the lights, in the fuse box just here, we've got basically the lights, the sort of bulb fuses if you like for the circuits, but there's a couple here which are for the motor retractors for the lights. So if you remove the caps, I'll just show you this one here, and you can rotate the bulbs the light clusters using this manually to raise and lower them. Now clearly what happens, if you've never done it, I'll just tell you, if you flick this and roll it around with the fuses still in, the motors will engage, and all of a sudden these bulbs will and they'll slam down and have your fingers off. So you've got to be super careful with that. So you may want to disconnect the battery. I haven't. Well, I have been on and off while I've been messing about with it, but obviously you can't, you know, it becomes quite awkward keep disconnecting and reconnecting whilst you're actually trying the lights themselves, because you do need the power. So what I've done is, for safety, just taken the fuses out of the motors, and everything else from there will be okay. So that's that bit. So next step, onto the lights. So I mentioned about retracting the lights manually. Now, why would we need to do that? Essentially, what you have to do to get to the light units is to remove the top housing there from the light unit itself. There's a couple of small screw bolts on the top there. I'll just remove this now. And you can see there's just one on each corner, but you've got to partially let the light down to expose those screws there to get them out. So it's just those two there, and I think they may have actually been screwed through the side. I took these off yesterday and have forgotten already, but that's basically fairly simple to get off, and I'll put him down safely a sec. And the other thing to do then is there's a plastic shroud which screws in. I'll just show you there, just on the side of the unit. A couple of screws through the face there, and one just at the back on the other side. Once you've unscrewed those, this unit, this sort of cap or surround, actually comes away, exposing the light itself. Now, I have actually just tested this, and whilst this isn't a video about these specific lights, it's more just about changing them. I did notice that for all of these so-called cables and relays and everything that's supposed to be plug and play, there were various cables that weren't connected that were supposed to trigger the right circuits at the right time. And just to make sure everything else technically was okay with the car, I did actually go to the very simple process of finding the original multi-plug for the bulb, which is actually down there, and placing a regular H4 bulb into it. And what that's done is it did show that the dip light system worked fine, the light switch itself worked okay, the main beam filament worked, and the telltale came back on. So I'm quite confident that that we can sort this out just by putting the old units back in. But I'll talk a little bit more about the relays once I've got the lights in, so stay tuned. So just while I'm pulling all these cables back through the chassis, I've disconnected the battery just in case any of these contacts kind of touch each other or short themselves out on the bodywork, so just for safety. I've just hooked up a quick battery charger on there. It's pretty cold at the moment. I may as well take the opportunity just to trickle charge the battery while I'm messing about with the front end here. So what we've got to do now, we can see the snakes with the relays. That's coming away. We've disconnected the feed from the battery. Now it looks as though, I don't know if you can see through there, but it looks very much as though the cables are actually connected. You can't really see in there, but basically the cables have been fed through a small hole and connected at the other end, so I'm going to have to cut those cables to pull them back through, and then trace the cables from one side. Just unclip these, I think. Yep, just snap all those out, and then they just basically run through very badly. I mean, you can see probably that they've got squashed, and the light was retracted onto this cable, squashing it. Doesn't do the electrics any good, it doesn't do the motor any good, and it looked naff because the light wasn't down properly. So yeah, let's just get rid of all this rubbish and then we'll see what we've got. So the wiring's coming away now. There's some of the earth cables. We'll lose them for a minute. Crazy really, people take such shortcuts. Fair enough, this one was earthed into the wing bolt there. but one of the ring bolts, which I've just put back in, was actually removed to mount the relay, because he obviously was short of a bolt and decided he was going to pinch one of the wing fixings instead, which is a bit naff. And here at Retro Restos, we're all about putting things back how they're supposed to be, so that's gone back in there now and looks just how it was supposed to. Just a quick point on, if I can do this one-handed, the cables coming through the rail there obviously are fed through and then into this multi-block. Now normally you can see they snap through, and there's a little tag, if you can see it, but there's a little, it's not focusing very well, there's a little tag there, and if you depress that, it does allow you to retract them from the actual bulb holder, so you don't have to cut the cables to get them back through the hole. So that's worth mentioning. And I expect half the problem with this in the first place is the guy who wired it up probably put the wrong cables into the wrong hole there, which is why it's been taking the feeds from the wrong beam, I think. So I'll explain a bit more about the relays later, but I think that was probably half of his problem. But either way, let's crack on and just get all this rubbish out. So that's all the old cabling out now. You can see it much cleaner and tidier. So then just by using the manual retraction there, which you can possibly just see moving, what we can do now is wind this back up, obviously in the direction of the arrow, winds the actual unit up. So now we can get to the fixing screws. There's one there, one on the bottom and one on the side just over here, and they're held against springs, of course, because that's the tension that effectively sets and holds the aim of the unit. You can probably hear it there. So we need to take all this out now, so we'll just undo the screws, make sure we don't lose the screws or indeed the springs, and then we'll just bolt the new unit straight in.